what I like the most about what we do is I really do believe in the philosophy behind RBP.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the only RBP vendor, but the underlying value that it provides to employers, as well as the tool that it provides employers to provide to their employees a higher quality, low-cost health plan, helping them to keep money in their pockets, lower their monthly contributions, lower their deductibles. That's real dollars for families.
Yeah.
I like that mission.
Yeah, well, because you know that it's possible. And I think the hardest part of being a next-gen advisor, being a Health Rosetta advisor, being a not someone that's playing by the rules of the game and the system, not being a puppeteer of the insurance carrier. The struggle for folks that do what I do as a healthcare consultant and a true benefits advisor is just getting people to suspend disbelief and just getting them to think, there is something that I can do about this. I can actually make a difference. I can drive savings in the realm of 30 to 60%. It's possible. And once you get that and once you experience it, because even for me, as someone that had been in the insurance game since 2001 is when I started with Aflac, I had been around broker meeting after broker meeting during open enrollment, supporting brokers, traditional mainstream brokers. And the news was always bad, right? It was always, hey, your rates are going up. The benefits are going down. And so you're paying more for less. And it is what it is. So I got conditioned like everybody else to say, oh, it is what it is. But that's bullshit.
Yep.
It's not. That's not what it is. What it is you're playing by the rules that they set. And what we do is we play a different game altogether.
Yes.
And so that, takes a real leap of faith. But I think we're at a tipping point now. And I think the first time, even though I'd been in the game for a while, the first time that really the light bulb went off for me is I was at one of Nelson Griswold's conferences. I think it was probably one of the Ascends. And he had Marshall Allen, who may rest in peace, he passed away recently, died prematurely. But he was a tremendous advocate in our industry, someone who was a trained reporter, investigative journalist, amazing guy. And he was the first guy that I heard say that we're in a healthcare bubble. Mm-hmm. And we had been in a bubble for a while, but it was the first time that I heard anyone kind of use those words. And it just really landed with me. And I said, you know what? He is right. We are definitely in a bubble. And I think we're at a point now where we are at a tipping point. Now, I hedge my bet always, and I say, knowing what I know and knowing how big the bubble is, because we're basically a $5 trillion industry now, 20 cents of every dollar that we're spending is healthcare. There are an awful lot of people that have a lot to lose if things change, right? So I always it's always in the back pocket, thinking, I don't consider myself an idealist. I somewhat am an idealist. I like to think positively. I like to think about a brighter tomorrow. And when I think about what is possible, it excites me. But then I the other business sense, kind of the more practical, pragmatic Ray is like, they're going to squash you like a bug. You have no shot, right? They're going to crush you. But I think so you come to Homestead and the business model, and it's interesting to me that your leader came from a background where he was president of United Healthcare, the biggest entity in the healthcare space in the U.S. So he knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows all of the different profit centers that are in their business. And he thinks to himself, there's got to be a better way. And so Homestead was his stab at a better way. When did he start the business, and what was the journey like for him?
Homestead began functionally in 2014.
Okay.
So the first step that he did, our name Homestead, because oftentimes brokers will say, "Are you guys a mortgage company?" It's Homestead. It doesn't sound right.
Right.
Not one of those sexy industry names. Right?
Yeah.
He purchased Homestead Insurance Company that had been around for 68 years, property and casualty.
Okay.
And he capitalized it and turned it into a reinsurance platform. He then purchased Index, which is a TPA based in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. At the time, they had been around for 47 years, had a lot of traditional legacy groups with unions and teachers in Jersey. So he took these two entities that had long history and experience, and then he built with a gentleman by the name of David Fishbone a repricing platform, a proprietary repricing engine. We do it all ourselves.
Yep.
And so he created this one-stop model. So we own the TPA, we own a reinsurance company, we own a repricing platform. They develop quota share partnerships with U.S. Fire, Pan American, Gerber nationwide. So we write on their paper, but we share risk with them. So he built a one-stop, built in there a PBM, care management provider, all those elements that are necessary for sustainable, level-funded or self-funded health plan. He built all of that together and took it to the market in 14.
Wow. And so when you say he built it all together, so what I'm hearing is Homestead is a health plan?
Yes.
So all of the pieces, so folks, in a traditional arrangement where you have a benefits advisor who is coming in and they're building a custom plan, you're relying on their expertise to put all the pieces together, bring all of these ingredients together like a master chef or a Michelin star chef. And if they're good at their game, you're going to end up with a Michelin star result, right? If they're not good at their game, you're going to end up with something that you'd rather not dine on. And there's a lot of that out there, so you have to be careful. But so I'm curious, do you have flexibility in your program, because you mentioned that you have a PBM built in? What if an advisor wanted to bring a PBM that they have a relationship with because they've got a running track record? And I think the hard part for any employer, HR director, CFO that might be listening in is, look, I buy United Healthcare. It's a one-stop. Everything is in that package. I don't worry about it. It's set it and forget it. And I know I might be getting price gouged, but I have a business to run. Like, I can't be bothered with this shit until they really slow down the music and hopefully work with a reputable advisor who shines light on the fact that operating expenses are important. And if you don't look at your operating expenses or you turn a blind eye to it, you're bleeding money for your organization. And if we can show you a way to cut your biggest operating expense after payroll, because healthcare typically is, if we can show you how to cut that by 30 to 60%, that's money that drops straight to your bottom line and deliver a better result in terms of the quality of care for your people. Is that something you might be interested in? And no, it's not a fucking fairy tale. It's something that we do every day. Then, you may get their attention. But I guess back to my point, you have to work with a reputable advisor that can bring all of those ingredients together, or have a health plan where all of that is kind of baked in. So I'm hearing that you're a health plan that all of that heavy lifting has been done when they come to Homestead. But is it that way or the highway?
No. There's the ability to carve out. So we can carve out stop loss. We can carve out PBM. In some cases, some particular brokers like a particular care management provider. And that space has kind of evolved. There are some that are a lot more sophisticated and
Yeah.
engaged in cost containment.
Yeah.
Rather than just, oh, that's covered on your plan. All right, go where you want to go. Right? They're involved in steerage, and those are the ones we like to work with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so what has the experience been like? You've been with them now for several years. Are you finding that you hit the easy button here? Is it just, hey, my life is a dream and there are never any complaints or any issues? It's all roses, or not so much?
I love selling reference-based pricing because it forces me to be at my best every day. Listen, we have a solution that is still in the early adopter stage. There's a lot of perceived friction and noise that comes with RBP. And it's a tough sell because it's not just a financial sell, and it's not just a health insurance sale. For reference-based pricing, it's ultimately a change management. So I've seen entities where we're saving them 34%, right? And that's just on the stop loss, because you're going to outperform the stop loss in the real claims experience.
Sure.
And them not make the move because they perceive that they couldn't handle the change that's necessary.
Yeah.
So RBP, it's about finances, yes. It's about health insurance, yes. But I'm finding more and more the groups that are willing to take the step of empowerment are groups that can embrace the dynamic of change. If they fear change, they're not going to do it. And in some cases, I've actually said to groups, I don't think you're ready to do this.
Right.
Because it requires something on the part of leadership to partner with us on a continual, ongoing education basis.
Right.
If you're not willing to do your part as a leader, particularly in the first year or two,
Right.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an excellent point. I think first and foremost, you have to know who you're getting into bed with. You have to know who your providers are. And it's not easy, as a broker, I could tell you, it's not easy selecting a TPA because there's a lot that I have found, and it's not only through personal experience and learning the hard way, but it's through horror stories with my fellow brokers and advisors. They drop the ball. And, I personally can't work with folks like that. Like, mistakes are fine. If you tell me that you make mistakes, okay, what do you do about it? And how long does it take you to fix it?
Yeah.
And do you fix it? That's what's important. And because, look, I don't care if you're going from a fully insured plan from United to Cigna, people are going to scream like stuck pigs, right? My provider's not a network. Right? Like it's the end of the world. But, we do business across the country. In the New York metro market where I am, if you go out onto the exchange and you want the quote-unquote best, highest platinum plan, family coverage, United Healthcare, on the exchange, you'll have the privilege of paying over $70,000 a year for that policy, right? And so, I don't know who the fools are who buy that, but they are out there. But the reality is you have to ask yourself as a business leader, am I being fiscally responsible?
Yes.
It's a whole other conversation about the CAA and your responsibility as an employer to manage plan assets in the same way that you would a 401k, which is not a new thing, but it's becoming
more prevalent.
Yeah. But the answer is this doesn't necessarily have to be your biggest expense after payroll.
Right.
It can be something that, and the whole conversation and the spin on it doesn't have to be about the gloom and the doom and the pitfalls and where your incumbent broker wants you to focus.
Right.
However, you must be aware of what those pitfalls are. And so I think if you're dealing with a good advisory team, if you're dealing with a good provider like Homestead, and you're doing the work and you're having the conversations and you internalize it with your leadership team first,
Yep.
and you're on board because you can't sustain this any longer. You can't continue to have people work more for less
Yes.
every year because it's being eaten up by their healthcare budget. And what if, by the way, you can have a custom plan where if they accept steerage and they choose to go where the quality is highest and the cost is lowest, they have a path to $0 out of pocket to the boots on the ground. I don't know. You've had a career in HR, pretty big one. Do you think there's something to be said about recruiting and retention?
There's a huge recruiting and retention bonus by implementing those types of plans. What I find is I want to be careful about what I say and how I say this. I want to be concise. When you engage with the leaders, right? So more often than not, I want to be able to have the opportunity to have a strategic conversation with the leadership of a company and to ask them a couple of questions. What's your long-term cost containment strategy? And everything else you do in your business, you have a strategy. And it's across a multi-year platform.
Yeah.
Do you bring that same discipline, those same set of competencies to the lens of healthcare? Most don't.
Yeah.
They just wing it from year to year, cross the fingers, and hope. Oh, I hope it's just 15% increase, right? So it's a strategic conversation, and then I'll give you this example of a large charter school system that we were working with, and their broker wasn't as consultative as Health Rosetta brokers are.
Okay.
And they wanted to maintain the status quo because it was easier for them to maintain the status quo. And we're going through the numbers and everything. We're showing them 38% savings. And for the first time, because when you're on a traditional plan, you don't get to see your data. You don't know.
Right.
So they're looking and they're like, wait a minute. We spent $4.6 million in premium to cover $1.8 million in claims. And he said to the broker, he said, is that right? And I'm sitting like, yes.
He's paying attention.
Like, what you gonna say now? And he's like, I think the decision is clear about what we're gonna do. And oftentimes groups, because of their advisors, don't necessarily have the empowerment to take a look at their health situation through a large lens like that. Getting all the data on the table and being informed as a fiduciary like they do in every other part of their business.
Right.
Like if someone came to them and said, man, your supply chain costs are going up double digit every year for the next 3 years, somebody's getting fired.
Right.
They're looking into that.
Oh, hell yeah.
They're going to find another solution.
Right.
But the prevailing paradigm of the status quo when it comes to healthcare, because people believe that the ability for their employees to get the care that they need is attached to these very traditional models
Right.
that aren't necessarily aligned to the financial interest of the group. When I came into the industry, one of the first things that I saw was, and I hate to do this to Ray, but that I realized quickly the healthcare system's not broken. See, broke implies not functioning according to design.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
It's working just the way they designed it.
That's so true.
It's working just the way they designed it.
Right.
So it just wasn't designed to work for employers and employees. And so people are spending all this time and all this energy to try to fix something that's not broke. We all grew up with the adage that says, if it ain't broke,
Don't fix it.
don't fix it.
Right.
So the question isn't how do we fix it? The question is innovate.
Right.
And, if you wanted this to sound simple,
Yep.
but it's a paradigm shift. If you want to pay less for healthcare, you must be committed to a model that's actually designed to pay less for healthcare.
Correct. I couldn't have said it better myself. And a lot of thought went into the name of this podcast.
Yeah.
And so you are 100% correct in that the system isn't broken for all of the people that are making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
It's working exactly as intended.
But for the rest of
us,
highly dysfunctional.
yes. And if you ask people, what do you think about healthcare? I think the first thing that rolls off of their tongue, the first thing that comes to mind is it's broken. Like it needs an overhaul. And I think everyone agrees with that. And I agree with you completely. Like it's if you want to pay less for healthcare, you have to pay less for healthcare because 80% of your spend, 85% is claims. If you're not doing anything to manage claims other than point people to a network where there are providers, which is doing nothing for claims, you're going to keep spending more.
And one of the things we try to do in our plan designs is structure different point solutions and different platforms of care, because I think you would agree with this. Anything you can do to keep someone from walking through hospital doors, right? Whether it's special surgical centers, other places, imaging centers, anything to keep people from out of the hospital doors, you're already making a dent and cost. The moment they walk through that door is the moment now your financial stability, your plan is now in jeopardy.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we've gotten kind of way off the rails, right? Because the whole concept of insurance is to protect people from catastrophic financial loss. And we have insurance policies that cover everything, so people are just conditioned to use their health insurance like a Pez dispenser. Like, boom, there's another one. Boom, there's another one. Especially in urban neighborhoods where there aren't doctors' offices, where do people go? They go to the emergency room. Right.
Highest form of care there is.
Exactly. And so the most expensive care and the most prevalent in those communities, that's a problem. But I think we have to get back to a place where we have plans that are designed to protect us financially from the true risk. And that threshold is going to be different depending upon household income and where people are at. But for the most part, we're spending an awful lot of money for services that largely go unused, especially if we're talking about the younger, healthier population. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on policies that they never use or touch.
And these traditional PPO policies are kind of cookie cutter, and you got to take it or leave it. There's no capacity to flex and design. And with Homestead, our health plan, we provide a great deal of flexibility so that the employer can customize his plan according to his culture and the financial needs of their employees. We have a bunch of set plans, but then we can also customize. When groups come on, we work with them to say, okay, what are the things in your plan you want covered or don't want covered? And that's really an unusual thing when you're working with folks, because they're so used to the traditional saying, no, this is what we cover and this is it. You take it or leave it.
Right.
And the ability to custom design that. And then we educate them. If you choose to include that, here's how that may impact the overall financial stability of your plan. Right? Or, yes, this may be a cost, but by you making this investment in this item here, you're going to prevent costs further down the road.
Right.
So we take a real consultative approach with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think so typically what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll look at what their plan covers today. And then we'll look to mirror that, but also, point out anything that might be a red flag, anything that might be, just either, I don't want to say excess coverage, but maybe an employer is not even aware that they have the ability to make a change that may make a material difference on the back end in terms of stop loss, et cetera, et cetera. And now we have, these immunotherapy drugs and these gene therapy drugs, and some of them can go into the millions of dollars. And so there are so many employers out there, large employers, enterprise employers, that, they have a legal team to scrutinize every document that comes through their door, if it's a real estate acquisition or M&A or this or that. But when it comes to their health care policy and contracts, they don't look at any of it. And it literally, it could be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not putting eyes on it, and they're not getting any counsel or advice on, hey, maybe we ought to rethink this, or maybe this clause needs to be removed, or is it compliant with the CAA? Because gag clauses are a big thing that don't belong in contracts anymore. They're still out there. They're still in there. And so I think as employers, HR, leaders become more savvy, CFOs become more savvy, you're going to see more scrutinization, a little more time and money spent on the back end to save them a ton of money on the front end. And I think, so tell us just a little bit about how do you go direct to market to employers? Is that your thrust? Are you going through brokers and advisors that are bringing you business? Is it all of the above?
All of the above.
All the above.
All of the above. So our primary distribution pipeline is through broker relationships. We highly value broker relationships.
Yep.
They have the ear and the trust of the group.
Yep.
Right. We do engage in direct market to employers, and we may have an initial conversation. I got a big conversation with a big bank next week, and it's going to be an initial conversation with their leadership. But then we tell them, let's bring your broker to the table, because ultimately they're going to make that decision not based on your word, but they're going to make that based on their trusted advisor. And so what we've learned is better to bring them into the conversation as early as possible. And then we work through a bunch of different associations. So we have the CFO Alliance that we work with. It's a national association of CFOs, obviously. And we go direct with them, but it's the same process. Eventually, we are bringing their advisor to the table to partner with us in the decision.
I'm curious about that, because first of all, I'll go on record as saying brokers typically, in my experience, are funny, charismatic. They're great people persons. They know how to play the game. Typically they end up being best buddies or friends with HR, with leadership. And we know statistically that they could do a bad job, meaning bringing their clients double-digit increases year over year and keep their job. The average tenure is 6 years for a broker. But if they're playing, especially if you're playing with, the big dogs, the big privately held brokerages, and certainly the publicly traded brokerages, they're in the pockets of the insurance carriers. And it's not in their interest to do business in your model, because they're going to lose money and they're going to lose revenue. Now, on the flip side, they may keep a client if they go over to the dark side and they do work with a Homestead. But in my experience, the rubber really has to meet the road. And I wonder about the wisdom of bringing in, without naming any names, we all know the brokers that I'm talking about. You're bringing their rep to the table. How receptive are they?
I think what happened, because in the beginning we didn't, and then what we found is by the time they came, I had an adversary.
Yeah. Right.
And now all the progress we made now gets bogged down.
Ground to a halt.
Yeah. Right. Because we're the enemy.
Right.
So it's better to bring them in, confront that. There's two dynamics that I found that are necessary. One has to do with, we'll talk about the financials, we'll talk about the insurance dynamic piece, but there's another piece that I think is essential for the business owners to recognize, and that is the broker works for you. And you have to drive this process.
Right.
If you're not willing to drive this process. So there's a group that we've onboarded, private equity group, and the owner is on the board of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve. He's got a bunch of PE portfolios. He gave us one. He says, you do right with that, we'll open up the rest to you. I'm like, awesome, great. He took a very direct approach. And he said to the broker, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really
Bold leadership.
bold leadership.
Bold leadership is really what it boils down to.
And it's that whole change thing. And am I committed to bringing the type of change to our health benefits on behalf of the financial stability of our organization and the overall quality of solution we provide to members? Am I really committed to that outcome?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's hard is I can't call out the broker.
Right.
I want to,
Right.
but I can't.
Right. Well, and it's not necessarily to villainize the broker.
Right.
You know, I'm a capitalist through and through. I love capitalism. Love Ken Langone's book. I love capitalism, and I think it's any organization, nonprofit or profit, their goal is to generate revenue. That's it. At the end of sentence, like period, end of sentence. I have no problem with business for business. The trouble in healthcare and the problem that I have with the status quo model is that as a broker, I should not be in a position where I deliver increases to my client and simultaneously have my compensation increase.
That's the part.
That creates an incredible conflict of interest. And anybody that is in that sort of a model, sorry for my language, but what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? That's not how business works. You need to hold your brokers and your partners accountable. And the objective should be, we want the highest quality healthcare for our internal clients, our second family, the people that we work with. For them and their family members, we demand the highest quality healthcare possible. Let's start there. That's number one. Number two, we want that highest quality healthcare delivered for the lowest possible cost. That's common sense stuff. It doesn't get more complicated than that. So it sounds to me like that's exactly what you're doing at Homestead. Are you happy?
I'm thrilled. I am. Listen, RBP is a tough sell. Right? It's a tough space.
And why is it tough? It's tough because it's not the delivery system that people are accustomed to. We're taking them out of their comfort zone. And so what I find is it's not going to be the right fit for everybody. Let's just say that out of the gate. Your organization may be a candidate for it, may not be a candidate for it, but it doesn't only have to be RBP. There are other solutions and ways to skin a cat.
Like we do a couple of different things. We'll provide a dual option for groups, particularly larger groups over like 300 or so. We'll say, listen, let's crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
I call it the democratic choice. But let's put it before your folks, and they can choose a PPO or an RBP.
Yeah.
We'll heavily incentivize the RBP.
Yeah.
Right? And what generally happens is by the third year, you start the first year 70% PPO, 80% PPO, 20% RBP. By the third year, it switches.
Yeah.
Because the word gets around.
Right.
Right. So that's one of the things. I think what makes it most challenging is you're really asking. You alluded to this earlier. So you're asking people whose really their business expertise and their focus is widgets, and you're asking them to be an expert in our industry.
Correct.
Which can be complicated.
Yeah.
And they're like, listen, I just want to make widgets.
Right.
I'm going to leave this to my advisor, and he's gonna tell me.
Right.
And a lot of times, what I've run into is advisors who've been burnt by RBP.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, RBP was the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's been people that's been burnt by it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, when I talk with consultants, advisors, brokers, they'll say, "Listen, I don't want to get fired."
Right.
And one of the things that we've built into our culture at Homestead, because we were part of that wild, wild west. We had some wild years, man.
Yeah.
We have two primary missions. One is to deliver value to our clients, and then two is to protect the reputation of the broker that brought us to the table.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and really, I think so. it's still the Wild Wild West in a sense. We're in the early days,
Yep.
right? All right. So, maybe it's not quite the Wild Wild West that it once was, but it very much still is. I think it's important to just kind of put that out there. But I think the biggest piece is you have to set expectations.
Yes.
If you're, in any business, pick a business, manufacturer, service oriented, whatever the business is or organization may be, maybe it's an educational institution, you just don't want, as leadership, you don't want to be blindsided.
Right.
And you don't want your employees and their family members to be blindsided, to be sold a false bill of goods. So I think with RBP or any strategy, because RBP is one of many numerous strategies, but in any strategy where you're changing from what people were used to, there's a change involved. It's really important to share with them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's what can go wrong. Here's what will happen, not can happen. Here's what will happen, and here's what we will do when that happens.
Yep.
That changes things because people just don't want to be left with their ass hanging out.
No.
They want to know
No.
that, hey, yes, we talked about this, and the reality is I've never experienced the case where someone didn't get the care that they needed. The road getting there might have had a bunch of twists and turns, but they're always going to get the care that they need.
And that's the biggest concern that groups will have. Can my members get the care that they need? Because in their minds, you don't have a network.
Right. Yep.
I can get care without network.
Yep.
Right?
Of course.
As if the surgeon is in the scrub room.
Right.
And that person on an RBP plan is laid out on the table. And the surgeon looks on the screen and he says, "What? They don't have a buka?
Mm-hmm.
Put away those sharp scalpels. Bring me the rusty scalpel. Bring out that old used knee."
Right.
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 That's kind of. It sounds hilarious, but that's kind of like the ideal people have in their mind.
No, but David, the reality is in a traditional, fully insured plan, the network is so broad. You may be getting surgeon rusty scalpel, right? You may be.
True.
Whereas in a custom plan, I think we have the ability to curate care. That's one of the cornerstones of a good custom plan is having a team that's dedicated to finding the highest quality providers.
I'll give you a specific example. We just onboarded a group in Denver, restaurant chain, and we worked with leadership because when something goes wrong on the plan, isn't it always
The CFO, the CEO's wife,
right?
always.
So we asked for all of leaderships. Tell us all of your physicians you're seeing. Tell us all the specialty meds that
Yep.
you're seeing. And then we worked to make sure that they were either in the prime, because we use a primary care physician network prime, right? So that highest point of utilization on any plan, that's covered. And the first thing we do is we survey a group's provider universe. Tell us all your primary care physicians. Do you have an appointment coming up in the first month? We don't want you reaching out to the doctor and explaining the name on your card. We will reach out to the doctor on your behalf. We call it clear the path. And we're going to explain to them the most important thing they want to know. What am I going to get paid and how am I going to get paid? And we're going to take care of that.
Yep.
So we did that for the group. We did that for their RX side, and that helped them to be able to make the change because, to your point, it's that continuity of care. Small percentage of people on the plan actually use a primary care physician, but those that do don't want to change.
Right.
Right. So if we can reach out and make sure that there's that continuity of care, we do all of that before the group goes live.
Yeah.
So group comes on board 60 days out or 45 days out or
Right.
sometimes 30 days out.
We like to avoid those.
Yeah. The first thing we start doing is reaching out to their care universe. So by the time the plan goes live and members are actually utilizing the plan, we've already cleared the path for them to get the care that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. So, there are a lot of moving parts to this, right? We covered a lot of ground today. what is the easiest way for people to find you? How do they get to David Jones?
Two ways. You can go to homesteadplans.com. You could find me on LinkedIn, or you could email me directly, dsjones@homesteadplans.com.
That seems simple enough. Homestead is spelled just like it sounds,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Excellent. Okay, and basically, if anyone is intrigued, has any questions, wants to know more about how homestead plans work, you'd be happy, I'm sure, to enlighten them and kind of take them through the process.
Yeah, we are all about the first step in the process. It's all about education. So we welcome every opportunity to enlighten, inform, and educate.
Right. Awesome. Well, David, I am honored that you took some of your time to be here with us and educate and enlighten our audience. Tell us about your personal story. You went deep. We really appreciate that. And look, folks, I think that my job is to, help find guests that are interesting. And I don't think, I wasn't disappointed today. If you are, you probably tuned out a long time ago. But we have a guy here that he shared an incredible story and has been on a journey. And it didn't have to turn out this way, David. You could have been 6 feet under with, 17, 18 of your buddies, and it didn't turn out that way for you. You found a way to thread the needle and get out the other side, and in your words, by the grace of God. Yeah. And so, really appreciate you being here. But I look to work with people who are going to be there when the chips are down, when the shit hits the fan, because it always does.
Yes.
And regardless of the organization that you partner with, it's the people in that organization that are going to get the job done. And if they're quality people, they're part of a quality organization. And what I tell people is, look, I don't recall the last time that it took us longer than 24 hours to respond to a request for action. Typically, it's much quicker than that. And I'm not saying that it's going to be thoroughly resolved in 24 hours. Sometimes circumstances go beyond your control. But I look to partner with people who are as responsive as I am.
Yeah.
So that I know, look, if I have a problem, if I have an issue, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call David, and David is going to fix that problem. And I think you have that guy in David Jones. So
Our philosophy is the problem is never the problem. The response to the problem is a problem. If you have a problem, you respond, you fix it, you've strengthened the relationship. If you don't fix it, you've just now undermined the relationship.
Right. Yeah, well said. Let's leave it there. Really appreciate you being our guest today. Homestead Health Plans. Do I have that right?
Homestead Health Plans.
Homestead Health Plans. Homesteadhealthplans.com. Homesteadhealthplans.com.
Homesteadplans.com.
Homesteadplans.com. Let's get that right. Homesteadplans.com. David Jones, you're the man. Appreciate you being
Thanks,
here.
Ray.
Folks, until next time, peace and love always. Take care.
All right, that's a wrap. Hit like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.